Good day everyone. Once again, welcome to our discussion. For today's topic, ang ating paksa ay tungkol sa hyperbola. And when we say hyperbola, it is a set of all coplanar points such that the difference of its distances from two fixed points is constant. The fixed points are called the foci of the hyperbola. When a hyperbola, like the ellipse, has two axes of symmetry, two vertices, two foci, and two lattice rectum. And based from the given definition, the difference of its distances from two fixed points is constant. What do you mean by that? Suppose there's a given point P here and point Q here. If you notice the distance of the farther point P f sub 2 minus the distance of the closer point P f sub 1, okay, is equivalent to the distance of the farther point Q f sub 1 minus the distance of the closer point Q f sub 2. And since we are talking of distances, it is but appropriate to have this symbol absolute value. So yan ang ibig sabihin nitong definition na the difference of its distances from two fixed points is constant. Meaning to say, kahit saan natin ilagay yung certain point connecting to focus 1 or focus 2, tapos isusubtract natin yung distances ng farther point minus the closer point, iisa at iisa ang magiging kasagutan. That's why it is constant. Okay? The intersection of the two axes of symmetry is the center of the hyperbola. Nasaan yung center na yan? Ito. Since this is the intersection of the two axes, meron tayong x-axis and y-axis. The center is the midpoint between the two foci. As you can see, we have this focus 1 and focus 2. It is also the midpoint between the two vertices. Here is our vertex 1 and vertex 2. Again, the center is the midpoint between the two foci and also the midpoint between the two vertices. The hyperbola intersects the focal axis in 2 points called the vertices. Here is our vertex 1 and vertex 2. These vertices are the endpoints of a segment called transverse axis. Ibig sabihin, itong segment na to, okay? So these two vertices, yun yung endpoints of the transverse axis. And the axis that contains the foci, focus 1 and focus 2, the center, here is the center, and the vertices, vertex 1 and vertex 2 of the hyperbola is referred to as focal axis or principal axis. For some, ito yung tinatawag nilang major axis. Another axis that plays an important role in defining the hyperbola is the conjugate axis. In this figure, ito siya. Yung conjugate axis, makikita dito sa y-axis. At syempre pa, it's just a segment. This axis has no point in common with the hyperbola. It is perpendicular to the transverse axis at the center. Dahil nasa x-axis ang transverse axis, so perpendicular siya at the center. A segment passing through a focus of the hyperbola that is perpendicular to the focal axis is called a lattice rectum. Similar to a parabola, once na yung segment nag-pass through dun sa focus, okay, yun yung tinatawag nating lattice rectum. In this case, dito sa ellipse, dalawa ang ating lattice rectum. Bakit? Kasi dalawa ang ating focus. An auxiliary rectangle that is not part of the hyperbola plays an important role in graphing the hyperbola. As you can see, eto siya, yung broken rectangle na to. Ito. Okay? So this rectangle plays an important role in graphing a hyperbola. A pair of opposite sides of the rectangle passes through the vertices. Isa, dalawa. These are perpendicular to the transverse axis. The other pair passes through the endpoints of the conjugate axis. So in this case, eto naman siya. A pair of lines that is closely related to but also not part of the hyperbola are the asymptotes of the hyperbola. The asymptotes intersect at the center of the hyperbola. Ito, nag-intersect. Ito naman yung ating asymptote, yung kulay red. Yan, yung kahabaan. And then the other one. So yan yung ating asymptotes. A hyperbola approaches its asymptotes but will never intersect them. Meaning to say, kung halimbawa i-extend natin itong asymptote na to, okay, extend natin. So sabi dito, a hyperbola approaches its asymptotes. So meaning, you are getting closer and closer to your asymptote, but will never intersect them. Each of the asymptotes passes through the opposite vertices of the auxiliary rectangle. This table shows the characteristics of hyperbola with center at origin o dun sa point 0, 0. And same with other conics, meron ulit tayong patterns na pwede nating sundan. Dito, one is a hyperbola with foci on the x-axis and hyperbola with foci on the y-axis. Kung paano natin ginawa yung mga naunang conics, ganun din natin gagawin itong hyperbola with center at 0, 0. Susundan lang natin itong ating given patterns and characteristics upang sa ganun, magawa natin ang problems regarding hyperbola. Example, find the coordinates of the foci and vertices, the endpoints of the transverse axis, conjugate axis, and lattice rectum for each hyperbola whose center is at 0, 0. Draw the hyperbola and its directrices. Given equation, x squared over 64 minus y squared over 36 equals 1. If you look at the given equation, ito ay nakapattern dun sa hyperbola with foci on the x-axis. So lumalabas, 64 is equivalent to our a squared. So yung 64 ang a squared, while 36 is your b squared. If a squared is 64, pwede nating masabi that the value of a is 8, okay? And the value of b is 6. Bakit? Square root of 64, 8. Square root of 36, 6. After knowing the values of a and b, pwede na nating isolve ang c. So, to get c, it is what? Equivalent to square root of a squared, which is 64, plus b squared, 36. So, nagkataon, 64 plus 36 is 100. And square root of 100, the answer is 10. So, meron na tayong a, b, and c. In this problem, importante na ma-identify nyo ang values ng A, B, and C. Because if you look at the pattern, ang pinag-uusapan palagi ay values of these three, A, B, and C. So now, tingnan natin, how can we get the coordinates of the foci? For the coordinates of the foci, we have plus minus C, 0. Meaning to say, our foci is what? Plus minus c, that is plus minus 10, and then 0. Next, we have the coordinates of the vertices. We have plus minus a, 0. So our vertices, plus minus a, so that is plus minus 8, and then 0. Next, endpoints of the transverse axis. The endpoints of transverse axis, plus minus a, 0, almost the same with our vertices. So we have plus minus 8, 0. So these are the endpoints of our transverse axis. While the endpoints of the conjugate axis is what? 0 and then plus minus b. So 0 plus minus b. So that is plus minus 6. And lattice rectum, for the lattice rectum, dito na natin ilagay sa taas. Lattice rectum that is negative c. Okay, negative c. So we have negative 10. And then plus minus what? B squared. Our B squared is 36. And then over a, that is 8. So 36 over 8, kapag i-divide natin, is 4.5. Meaning our coordinate here is negative 10 and then plus minus 4.5. While the other is what? Positive c, so that is positive 10. And then, okay, and then 10, we have plus minus 4.5. So these are the endpoints of our lattice rectum. And then draw the hyperbola. So at first, gawa kayo ng Cartesian plane. Okay, gawa tayo ng Cartesian plane. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. So again, pag naguhit kayo ng ganito C to 8 na equidistant, at kagaya ng paulit-ulit na sinasabi ng sir, gumamit kayo ng ruler, and mas maganda kung graphing paper or graphing notebook para hindi na kayo nagguguhit. So, syempre pa, our center ay dito sa origin. Ito yung ating center, nasa origin. Okay? Focus, we have plus, minus, 10, 0. Ibig sabihin, kung ang focus ay plus, minus, 10, 0, mag-move kayo ng 10 units to the right. So, in our case, para yatang napalaki ano. So, gawa natin ng interval 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9, 10. So, this is our focus 1 or focus 2 kasi nasa kanan. Pero sabi nga natin, pwede naman mabaliktad. Kung gusto nyo ito ang focus 1, okay lang. Or kung gusto nyo ito ang inyong focus number 2. Okay? So, sa kabilang side, we have 1, 2, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, this is our focus 2 or focus 1. Okay? Next, we have vertices, plus, minus, 8, 0. So, from the origin, kanan tayo ng 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, this is our vertex. And then the other is 1, 2, kaliwa tayo ng 8, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, another vertex. Transverse axis is plus, minus, 8, 0. Meaning to say the endpoints of the transverse axis is at point 8, 0 and negative 8, 0. Ibig sabihin, etong dinrawing ni sir na to, kulay blue. So, hanggang 8. So, this will serve as our, what? Transverse axis. Ano? And then, for the conjugate axis, we have 0, plus, minus 6. Meaning to say, aakyat tayo ng 6. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, baba ng 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So, with this, baba tayo ng 6. At saka akyat tayo ng 6, 4, 5, 6. So, this will serve as our conjugate axis. And then, with the transverse axis and conjugate axis, gawa tayo ng auxiliary rectangle. Yung nabanggit natin kanina. At yun ang kahalagahan nito. Kapag na-identify na natin yung transverse axis and conjugate axis, makakagawa na tayo nitong tinatawag nating auxiliary rectangle. And using our ruler, i-connect natin yung vertices passing through the center. Okay? Tapos, doon sa kabila, Coconnect natin yung endpoints ng ating auxiliary rectangle. At syempre pa, etong line na to will serve as our asymptote. Tandaan nyo kanina? Okay? And then, for the endpoints of the lattice rectum, okay, since this is your vertex and this is your focus, kita nyo, no? For the endpoints of the lattice rectum, we have negative 10, positive 4.5, and negative 4.5. Meaning to say, from the focus, taas ka ng 4.5 units. Okay? Taas ka ng 4.5 units. At syempre, bababa ka rin ng 4.5 units. At yun ang magsisilbi nating lattice rectum. Doon sa kabilang focus, ganun din. Taas ka ng 4.5 units at bababa ka ng 4.5 units. At syempre pa, from the vertex, draw a smooth curve to make a parabola on this side. At sabi natin kanina, you are getting closer and closer to your asymptote. Pero, hindi natin siya pwedeng ma-meet. Sa kabilang side, eto. Okay. Sa kabila naman, eto. At syempre pa, tapos na ang ating graph ng ellipse. Example number 2, 25x squared minus 4y squared minus 100 equals 0. Ang target ay i-transpose itong negative 100 dito sa kabilang side. Yun muna ang inyong unang gagawin. So, magiging siyang 25x squared minus 4y squared equals 100. And since ang pattern natin is equal to 1, ibig sabihin, divide your equation by 100. So, ang lahat ng terms ay i-divide ninyo by 100. And 25 over 100 can be cancelled by 25. So, this will become x squared over 4. While the other 4 and 100 can be cancelled by 4. So, this will become y squared over 25. And 100 divided by 100 is 1. Again, ang magiging pattern natin is hyperbola with foci on the x-axis. If that is our case, ibig sabihin a squared is 4 and the value of a is what? Square root of 4, 2. Okay? While b squared is 25, meaning the value of b is 5. 4 square root of 25 is 5. At syempre pa, to solve c, it is equivalent to the square root of a squared, 4, plus b squared, 25. So, that is equivalent to square root of 29. At dahil hindi naman perfect ang square root of 29, pwede na lang natin siyang i-approximate as 5.4. Ibig sabihin, ito ang gagamitin nating value for C. Okay? Now, na-identify na natin ang A, B, and C. So, we can now get the coordinates of the foci. Sabi natin, it's plus minus C, 0. So, we have here foci as plus minus C, that is 5.4, and then 0. The coordinates of the vertices, we have plus minus a 0. So that is plus minus 2 and then 0. For the endpoints of the transverse axis, we have plus minus a 0. Still, it's plus minus 2 and then 0. Endpoints of conjugate axis, we have 0 plus minus b, so it's 0 plus minus 5. And then for the endpoints of the lattice rectum, it is what? Negative c, so that is negative 5.4, and then plus minus b squared, that is 25 over a, which is 2. And 25 over 2 is what? negative 5.4 here, plus minus 25 over 2 is 12.5. So with this, kaya na nating i-plot ulit yung ating hyperbola. To draw the hyperbola, isa-isahin lang muna ulit natin. Foci, we have plus minus 5.40, and then vertices is plus minus 2 and then 0. Endpoints of transverse axis plus minus 2 and then 0. Endpoints of conjugate axis is 0 and then plus minus 5, while the endpoints of the lattice rectum is negative 5.4 and then plus minus 12.5. With this, kaya nating i-draw yung ating hyperbola. Again, gawa tayo ng Cartesian plane. Let's say x-axis. And then ito yung ating y-axis. So, guhit lang tayo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Bakit parang ang dami? Kasi we have this 12.5. And then baba tayo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 16 and then 17. Tapos sa x-coordinates, ang pinakamataas is 5.4. Pwede na konti lang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So assuming na siya ay equidistant. Now, we have foci plus minus 5.40 from the origin. 5.4 units to the right. So, bilang ka ng 5.4 units to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.4. Approximately one of our foci ay naandito. And then, the other is negative 5.4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.4. Approximately another focus. And then, vertices, we have plus minus 2, 0 from the origin. Kanan ka ng dalawa. So this will be our vertex. And the other, kaliwa ka ng dalawa from the origin, another vertex. For the length of our endpoints of the transverse axis, plus minus 2, 0. Ibig sabihin, eto lang siya. Hanggang dito lang ang ating magiging transverse axis. Kasi nga, plus minus 2, 0. While the conjugate axis is 0 plus minus 5, meaning tataas tayo ng 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So hanggang dito. Okay, at bababa tayo ng 5. 1, okay, 1, 2, then 3, 4, 5. So this will serve as our conjugate axis. With these two, pwede na tayo makakreate ng sinasabi nating auxiliary rectangle. Sabi natin kanina, so malaking tulong itong ating gagawing auxiliary rectangle. Okay? At kapag nagawa na natin ang auxiliary rectangle, okay, i-connect lang natin yung vertices ng auxiliary rectangle passing through the center. Ito, kulay dilaw. Yan. And then sa kabila, ganun din. Ito. Okay. At itong yellow na to, itong yellow line na ginawa ng sir, ito yung magsisilbi nating asymptote. Now, for the lattice rectum endpoints, we have negative 5.4 and then plus minus 12.5. So from the focus, taas tayo ng 12.5 units. Kaya dinamihan ng sir yung bilang kanina. Approximately, ito siya. Bilang kayo from the focus ng 12.5 units pataas. Okay? At syempre pa, 12.5 units pababa. Approximately, kung halimbawa man, yan. See to it na nakabilang kayo ng 12.5 units na pababa. And from the vertex, connect so that you can draw one of the parabola dito sa ating hyperbola. And again, getting closer and closer to your asymptote only, but do not intersect. Sa kabilang side, the same. So from your focus, bilang ka ng 12.5 units, for example. So dapat talaga may ruler, But again, to give you the concept, ito pa rin ang ating magiging concept. Then 12.5 units down, and then from the vertex, draw. Okay? From here, draw. So this, therefore, is our graph of this hyperbola of the equation 25x squared minus 4y squared minus 100 equals 0. Again, para mas maging concrete, mas maganda kung gagamit kayo ng graphing paper or graphing notebook and use ruler para naman dito sa ating straight line. Write the equation of the hyperbola in standard form with center at the origin that satisfies the given condition. Determine the equation of its corresponding asymptotes. Then draw the hyperbola. The foci have coordinates plus minus square root of 5, 0 and vertex at 1, 0. If you are going to analyze, ang ibinigay dito ay foci, na kung saan ang foci daw ay plus minus the square root of 5 and then 0. So as one of the vertices, 1, 0. Kung titingnan niyo yung pattern, since center siya at the origin, ay di ibig sabihin, ang titingnan yung pattern ngayon ay yung may foci na plus minus certain value and then 0. And that is under hyperbola with foci on the x-axis. Ibig sabihin, ang sinusundan yung pattern dito ay plus minus c 0. So lumalabas, kung siya ay plus minus c 0, the value of c is what? Square root of 5. And one of the vertices ay 1, 0. Ang pattern naman niya ay plus minus a 0. So it's plus minus a 0. Lumalabas na ang a mo ngayon ay 1. With c and a, mako-compute natin ang b. Paano? C is equivalent to the square root of a squared, tama? Square root of a squared plus b squared. Since you are looking for b, pwede itong maging c squared equals a squared plus b squared. And then substitute c. We have square root of 5 squared equals a, that is 1 squared, and then plus the unknown b squared. Square root of 5 squared is 5, and 1 squared is 1, and then plus the unknown b squared. Transpose 1 dun sa kabilang side. So this will become 5 minus 1 equals b squared. And 5 minus 1 is 4, which of course equivalent to b squared. Sa makatuwid, square root of 4 is 2, so the value of b is 2. Again, na-identify na ulit natin ang A, B, and C. Ibig sabihin, madali na nating malalaman yung parts nitong ating parabola. Okay? So, sabi natin, for the endpoints of transverse axis, ano ang magiging endpoints of the transverse axis? Plus minus a 0. So it's plus minus 1 and then 0. For the endpoints of conjugate axis, it's 0 and then plus minus b. So it's 0 plus minus 2. And for the endpoints of the lattice rectum, we have negative c. So negative square root of 5. What is the square root of 5 in decimal? It's approximately 2.2. So that is negative 2.2 for the endpoints of the lattice rectum. And then b squared. So b squared is 4 over a. So that is 1. Meaning, so it's plus minus. Okay. Meaning we have negative 2.2 here. And then plus minus 4 over 1 is 4. So these are the endpoints of the lattice rectum. So problem, you are asked to determine the equation of its corresponding asymptotes. Ibig sabihin, for the asymptotes, okay, A, ay di meron ka lang equation na y equals plus minus b over a. So that is 2 over 1, or simply 2, and then x. So this will be your equation for your asymptote. Then draw the hyperbola. So pahiin lang natin itong portion na to para magkaroon tayo ng space sa ating graph ng hyperbola. So for a while, pahilang tayo. Okay. Ayan. Meron na tayong space. So we can now draw the Cartesian plane. Gawa tayo ng Cartesian plane. X-axis, y-axis, then guhit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Konti lang dahil 4 lang ang pinakamataas. And then we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pwede na. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, our center is at the origin. Alam natin yon. While the foci is at 2.20. So, meaning from the origin, kanan ka ng 2.2 units. At ito ay magsisilbing focus natin. At pag kumaliwa tayo ng 2.2 units, another focus. For the vertices, we have plus minus 1, 0. So plus minus 1, 0. Here is our vertex. And then another vertex. Ibig sabihin, mag-move ka lang ng 1 unit to the right and 1 unit to the left. Okay? For the endpoints of our transverse axis, it's plus minus 1, 0. Ibig sabihin, andito lang ang ating transverse axis. Ito, maliit lang. Ano? And for the endpoints of our conjugate axis, 0 plus minus 2 from the origin, taas ka ng dalawa. Okay? At syempre, pabababa ka rin naman ng dalawa. So with these two axes, the transverse and the conjugate axis, gawa ka ng auxiliary rectangle natin. Gumamit tayo ng broken line. Ano? At kapag meron na tayong nagawang rectangle, sabi nga natin, from the endpoints of from the vertices of the rectangle, gawa tayo ng guhit gamit ang ating ruler to make it straight. So alam natin yon. At syempre pa sa kabila, ganun din, nag-pass through sa center. At ito ngayon, yung ating tinatawag na asymptote. Which of course, ang equation niya, sabi nga natin, is y equals plus minus 2x. Okay, next we have what? The endpoints of lattice rectum is negative 2.2 plus minus 4. Tama? So it's negative 2.2 plus minus 4, and the other is positive 2.2 plus minus 4. Ibig sabihin, from the focus, alin muna, taas ka ng 4 na units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, kunyari, okay, ito. So dapat hindi maabot doon, ano. So, and then baba ka ng 4 na units, 2, 3, 4. So yun ang disadvantage kapag hindi gumamit ng ruler, o kaya kapag walang graphing paper or graphing notebook. So nag-estimate lang ang sir, then connect. So getting closer and closer to your asymptote. So tapos na tayo sa ating right side. Sa kabilang side, from the focus, taas ka lang ng 4 units. Okay, and then baba ka ng 4 units. So kunwari yan yun, and then connect from the vertex, getting closer to your asymptote. Okay, and then sa kabilang side, getting closer to your asymptote. At meron ka na ulit graph ng ating hyperbola. Okay? Now, after knowing all the characteristics of hyperbola with center at origin, at this point, ay dito naman tayo sa hyperbola with center at HK. And still, meron pa ulit tayong two patterns na kung saan hyperbola with horizontal focal axis and hyperbola with vertical focal axis. At susundan lang ulit natin itong mga nakasulat dito for us to easily solve problems in hyperbola with center at HK. Example, write the equation of the hyperbola in standard form that satisfies the given condition. Given, the center is at 0, 2, a vertex is at 0, 6, and a focus is at 0, 10. So kung i-analyze natin, ang given center ay 0, 2. Given vertex, 0, 6. And focus, given focus is at 0, 10. Since you have this center, 0, 2, okay, ibig sabihin, H is 0, and then K is 2. Okay? If you look at your vertex, it is 0, 6, which of course 0 is your H value. Tama? And if you look at the pattern, alin doon yung merong vertex or vertices na H lamang ang first coordinate? Well, it is hyperbola with vertical focal axis. Meaning, etong ating pangalawang table ang ating susundan. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, our vertex 0, 6 came from what? From H, okay? And then K plus A pattern. Why H, K plus A pattern? 0, 6 ay pataas. Ibig sabihin, nasa positive value ka ng Y. At dahil nasa positive value na ka ng Y, ang gagamitin mo lang ay yung plus. Dahil kung ikaw ay pababa, instead of K plus A, ang gagawin mo ay K minus A. In this case, dahil meron kang value ng 6 para do sa second coordinate of the vertex and K as 2, pwede nating masolve ang A. Ibig sabihin yan, gamit ito ay di K plus A is equal to 6. Ang K ay 2 plus A is equal to 6. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, if 2 plus A is equal to 6, ano ngayon ang A? Ay di ang A natin ay 6 minus 2, which is 4. So, yun ang ating value for A. Tama? And for the focus, 0, 10, ay di ang sabi naman natin, ang 0, 10 ay nasa taas din. So that means, ang pattern na gagamitin ay H and then K plus C. Kasi nga, ang 0, 10 ay nasa taas na bahagi kapag y-axis ang ating tiningnan. Kaya, positive. So, H, then K plus C. In this case, ang K plus C natin is equal to 10. K is 2, C is unknown, which of course equal to 10. Ibig sabihin, ang C ay 8. Okay? Na-identify natin ang A, na-identify natin ang C. Ano ngayon ang kasunod natin kukunin? Siyempre pa, solve for B. At we can solve B through C squared equals A squared plus B squared. C squared is 8 squared equals A squared 4 squared plus the unknown B squared. 8 squared is 64, while 4 squared is 16, and then plus B squared. Transpose 16. So 64 minus 16, the answer is 48. So 48 is equivalent to B squared. And syempre pa, square root of 48 is the value of B. Now, since ang sabi sa atin ay write the equation of the hyperbola, ay disundan natin itong ating pattern. Y minus K, so that is Y minus K, so 2. Quantity squared all over A squared, so our A is 4, 4 squared is 16, and then minus x minus h, that is 0, and then quantity squared. Since this is minus 0, pwede mo nang tanggalin itong minus 0. So pwede na lang siya simply as x squared over what? B squared, which is 48, then equals 1. And this equation is the correct answer. Express each of the hyperbola in standard form. Solve for the lengths of the transverse axis, the conjugate axis, and the lattice rectum. Determine the equation of the asymptotes and directrices of the hyperbola. Given 12y squared minus 4x squared plus 16x plus 72y plus 44 equals 0. Una, ayusin muna natin yung given equation. Pagtabihin yung parehong variable na ginamit. So, magiging siyang 12y squared plus 72y and then minus 4x squared plus 16x. And then transpose lang natin yung constant na positive 44. So, we have here negative 44. Okay? Then, i-group natin yung dalawa. 12y squared plus 72y as one group. So, lagyan natin ng parentheses plus 72y as one group. At syempre pa, itong dalawa rin using x variable na kung saan ay preceded ng minus sign. So, magiging na siyang 4x squared minus 16x. Bakit naging minus 16x? Kasi nga, preceded sila ng minus sign. Kung i-distribute natin siya papasok, negative times positive 4x squared is negative 4x squared, and negative times negative 16x is positive 16x. So, walang nabago. And then, equal to negative 44. Okay? Now, dito sa 12y squared plus 72y, ang leading coefficient ay 12. So, if factor out natin yung leading coefficient na 12, ang matitira sa loob ay the 12y squared divided by 12 is y squared, while 72y divided by 12 is 6y. Okay? And then plus blank. So, lagyan na natin ng plus blank kasi our target later ay to make this y squared plus 6y a perfect square trinomial. Na alam kong kaya nyo nang gawin. And then sa kabila, i-factor out natin yung leading coefficient na 4. Matitira sa loob ay x squared minus 4x. And then dagdagan na rin natin ng plus blank. Okay, equal to negative 44 and then plus blank. Okay, plus blank, and then minus blank. O bakit naman naging minus blank? Kasi nga preceded tayo nito na negative sign na to. So, tingnan natin. Let's make y squared plus 6y a perfect square trinomial. Sabi natin, i-divide yung coefficient of y by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. That's why we have y plus 3 here. And then quantity squared. So happen that 3 squared is 9. So lagay natin dito ng 9. And 12 times 9 is 108. Tama? So 108. Then copy coefficient 12. And then minus 4. And then square root of x squared is x. Then negative 4x divided by 2 is negative 2. So happen that negative 2 squared is 4. So lagyan natin din ng 4. And negative 4 times positive 4 is negative 16. Kaya sabi natin kanina, minus. Okay? So is equal to what? Negative 44 plus 108. The answer is 64, and 64 minus 16, the answer is 48. Now, if you look at our pattern, dapat equal sa 1. So, para maging equal sa 1, divide the equation by 48. By 48, and then by 48. Ayos? Simplify 12 over 48. So, this can be divided by 12. Ibig sabihin, magiging na siyang y plus 3 quantity squared all over 4. And the other 4 and 48 can be divided by 4. So this will become x minus 2 quantity squared all over 12 equals 1. At ito ang ating hinahanap na equation. Okay. We found out that the equation is equivalent to y plus 3 quantity squared all over 4 minus x minus 2 quantity squared all over 12 equals 1. Ibig sabihin, ano ang ating susundan na pattern? First or second? Siyempre pa itong second. Y plus 3 sa makatuwid, ang h or k, k value at h ay negative 3. At ang h value natin ay positive 2. Okay? Next, we have a squared is 4. If you look at the pattern, ibig sabihin, ang a natin ay 2. And then b squared is 12. So that means b is square root of 12. So approximately, what is the square root of 12? So it is about 3.5. Okay? With this, kaya nating masolve ang c, which of course equivalent to the sum the square root of the sum of what? A squared and b squared. So that is 4 plus 12. And that is square root of 16. So, ibig sabihin, the value of c is 4. Okay? At syempre pa, may isa-isa na natin ang ating dapat hanapin. So, solve for the lengths of the transverse axis. So, ano ba ang length of the transverse axis? Sabi dito, the length is 2a. Well, transverse axis, ang length daw ay 2a. Meaning, it's 2 times a. So, that is 2 times 2. So, the answer is 4. And then, the length of the conjugate axis. So, the length of the conjugate axis is 2b. So, ibig sabihin, 2b, we have 2 times the value of b, that is 3.5. So, equivalent to what? 7. Okay? So, we have here 7. And the latus rectum. So, for the latus rectum, what is the length of the latus rectum? The length of the latus rectum, 2b squared over a. That is 2b squared over a. ID we have 2, and then b squared is 12, and then over a, which is 2. So cancel this 2 by 2. So the length of the lattice rectum therefore is 12. Next, determine the equation of the asymptotes and directrices of the hyperbola with the values of k. Ano nga ang k natin? Negative 3, h as 2, and then a is 2, b is about 3.5, and c is 4. For the asymptotes, we have this pattern. So our asymptote, okay, is y equals k. So that is negative 3, and then plus minus a, which is 2, over b, that is 3.5, times the quantity x minus h. So x is x minus h, x minus 2. And since we cannot cancel 2 and 3.5 here, accepted itong ating equation for the asymptote. And for the directrices, we have y equals k, that is negative 3, and then plus minus a squared, so that is 4, over c, 4. So happened that 4 over 4 is 1, so we have negative 3 plus minus 1 as y. Therefore, y is negative 3 plus 1, and that is negative 2, while the other is y equals negative 3 minus 1, and that is negative 4. So these are the equations of the directrices of the hyperbola. Hanggang dito lang muna ulit ang ating discussion regarding hyperbola, at sana ay natulungan kayo ng Sir sa munting paraan. Kaya sa pagsusolve ninyo, importante na meron tayong pattern, and if you can memorize those patterns, much better. So good luck sa inyong pagsasagot, at alam ko naman kayang-kaya nyo yan. Thank you!